Hi everyone, welcome back to my videos. I hope you're all having a good day. As promised, today we're going to learn how to plant a tomato plant in a pot. And the reason why I specifically chose the tomato is because they can be grown in pots, but they're a little bit finicky. Anything else, I'll tell you afterwards, other things you can try, and those things will be much easier than trying to do the tomato. So here I have got my tomato plant, my tomato cage. You will need something, whether it be a cage or some sticks to support your tomato plant. Some fertilizer, I've got my pot, and over here I got a couple of bags of soil. So the first thing I'm going to go over with you guys is how to choose an appropriate pot. And basically, for me, there's only two key things to keep in mind when choosing a pot. Well, three. The most important, absolutely, is to make sure you have a pot that has drainage holes in it. This is critically important. You can put a plant in a pot that does not have holes, but it is really hard to make sure they get the right amount of water, and it will save you a tremendous amount of headaches to just get a pot with holes in it. And if you can see here, this pot is designed so that if you have a drill, you can drill holes into it there and there for drainage, or you can put more. So I do have one that already has the holes in it. And you can see here, it's dirty, my apologies, but you can see it had one spot to drill, but then I also put in 4 others, so there's 5 holes total in the bottom of the pot. And the reason why this is so important is because if water pools around the roots of your plant for too long, your plant will not be able to get enough oxygen, and the roots will eventually rot and die. Now, you may have heard some people say to put rocks or gravel in the bottom of the pot for drainage. You don't want to do that. That's not good. What it does, it ends up creating something called a perched water table. So in a pot, the water, where the water pools, is usually right at the bottom, and then it drains out. And if you put rocks, let's say up to here, this is soil and this is rocks. Well, now your water table sits up here because the soil has to be completely soaked with water before that water up here will drain to these rocks down here. And so now you have your water table is up here, which is right where the majority of your roots are going to be, instead of being down here where it can cause less harm to your roots. So the next thing that's important about a pot is if it's a plant that's going to be in the full sun, you might notice both these pots are light colored. They're not black, they're not dark blue, dark green. And the reason why that's important, especially with the black, is because the black will soak up a lot of heat from the sun. And if they're going to be in the sun full time, it can actually make the soil too hot, and you're basically going to cook your plant, cook your roots. And then the last thing is you want to make sure you have the right size. Now, the size is not as important because if you put your plant in a pot that's not big enough, the worst that's probably going to happen is you're going to restrict how big the plant can get. And that's actually how a lot of bonsai plants are created. They're not actually plants that are dwarfed varieties. They are just the regular variety of a plant that is kept in a small pot in order to restrict its growth size. But if you want your plant to do well, you want to try and get a decent sized pot. If you're growing vegetables, it will also depend on what kind of vegetable. Like a tomato plant, you need a big pot for one tomato. A pepper plant, again, big pot. This is 24 inches across. One pepper plant per pot. But then if I was to put lettuce, which doesn't need as much space, I might put in a big pot like this, I might put 2 or 3, or if I was in the mood, maybe even 4. So next I wanted to cover for you guys why you would want to grow your food in pots or a raised planter bed like this one, versus why you would grow it in the ground. The first one being you have very small space. Like you're in an apartment, you only have a balcony, or maybe you share a house with other students, and you only have like a little small spot on your front step or something, or maybe you don't even have that and you just have a sunny window in your apartment building. So that's be the first reason why you can grow food in a pot. The second reason, and the reason why I'm showing you guys this raised planter bed, is if you live in Ottawa and you specifically live in Vanier, you need to grow all your food in pots or a raised planter bed like this that has a bottom on it so the roots can't go into the ground. And the reason for that is Vanier used to be an industry complex, and some of the industries that were there made the soil toxic, and in some places in Vanier the soil is still toxic, and it's fine to walk on, it won't hurt you, but if you grow food in it, the roots will go down to where the toxic waste is and they'll absorb that. Alright, so next we're going to cover how to choose a soil. You might see when you go to garden centers like really cheap black earth, and although it's very cheap, I don't recommend that you get it because it's a big hassle. Like, it doesn't have very many nutrients in it, it doesn't drain very well. Basically you have to do a bunch of stuff to it to make it work well for your plants. So you have to buy other things like compost and whatnot to add to it to make it good enough quality. And I'd personally just rather buy this stuff. It's a couple bucks more. I'm not necessarily saying this brand in particular, but something that has all-purpose, something that already has like compost, nutrients, stuff like that mixed into it. It will just save you a headache, and your plants will do much better if you pick the right soil. This particular type of tomato plant, I see we've lost the tag, is blue. So apparently when it grows on the vine with like a red, bluish, sort of blackish tint to it, and then as it ripens it turns red. Each year I try and do different varieties to see what works better and what doesn't. So this year I've got yellow cherry tomatoes, orange cherry tomatoes, blue cherry tomatoes, purple cherry tomatoes, and black cherry tomatoes. And if you're wondering why all cherry tomatoes, I'll explain that to you in a moment. But first we're going to get into the process of putting that plant in this pot. So you want to get your soil and a knife or some kind of scissors, something to cut open your bag, and we're going to dump bunch of this. So you can see here that I only filled the pot up about halfway, and that's because as you put in the soil, you need to break up all these clumps, and you also need to compact it down. Now, usually I find making a fist and then just using your fist is a good way to do it. And the reason why you want to compact down the soil is because if you were to just put a plant into this when it's not compacted, as you water the plant, the water will compact the soil, and then you'll end up with a plant sticking up here, and then all the soil that you put in around it will sink down, and then you have to like add more soil. So it's just easier to compact that down. You don't need to pound on it. You don't want to like pound, pound, pound. Just push, give a firm push. Get that nice and compacted. I'm sorry my camera keeps going askew. And there we go. And what we'll do is we'll keep doing this until we reach the right height. And I'm just going to put the camera down so that I can get both hands again. I also have to apologize. For some reason there's a whole bunch of 18-wheelers going down my street today. I don't know why. It's, you know, a fairly untraveled street, so I'm assuming someone's having construction done or yard work or something in the neighborhood, but I will do my best to pause between the noises so that you guys can hear me. So the next thing we're going to want to do is you're going to want to get this plant out of this pot, and I find the easiest way to do that is to, you take one hand, I'm right-handed so I usually do my right hand, and you're going to want to put the stem of the plant in between your two fingers here and just hold like that, and you're going to tip it upside down and give a gentle squeeze to the sides and to the bottom until the pot comes off. Now, if you look and your plant is really root bound, and I will try and drop a picture in the empty space here of that I took of a plant that I had that was really root bound. You would need to get like a pencil or a chopstick or something that you could get in there, and you need to really like tease out the roots, because if your plant is really badly root bound because of the pot, the roots are going to keep growing only in this space. They will not spread out to the rest of the pot, and eventually the plant will strangle itself, or it'll run out of soil and it will die. So, but even if it's not root bound, you sort of want to break this up just a little bit, gently squeeze it. You can loosen it up so that way it just helps the roots to spread out into the rest of the soil. And then we're going to take this and put it in the spot. So you can see here how crooked this tomato is, and if I try and straighten it, I really don't want to do more than that, because if I were to stake it and force it up really hard, it would damage it. So I'm just going to try and tuck the camera between my legs. Hopefully you guys can still see. And we're going to tip this whole thing of soil here out over a bit to straighten it. And then we're just going to take some of this soil and pat it underneath. So instead of this being flat in the pot, it's now on an angle, but as you can see, it helps straighten out the tomato. And then the next thing we're going to do is just fill in all the sides here with soil. And it's basically just going to be the same, pretty much the same as we did before when we were putting the soil in. You're going to dump some in, you're going to pat it down all the way around, check and see if it's level with that marker in my pot, and then keep repeating the process until you get, until it's all nice and full with this 1-inch marker. The one important thing when you're filling the last bits of soil in is you can see on this plant, this is where the soil line is for the plant. It's very important that you do not put soil above the current soil line of the plant, because if you did it with tomato, it would be fine. Tomatoes, they would just be like, oh look, more room to grow roots. So they would be fine, but a lot of plants, if you raise the soil level after it's already matured, it basically suffocates the stem and it will rot and die. So it's a good rule to follow, to just always make sure to never go above what the current soil line is. And this keeps wanting to tip on me. There we go. So now we're just going to dump some soil in. And then we're going to spread it around. We want to keep this guy tipped on that angle. Pat it down. And we're just going to keep doing that until it's full to the level that we need. Now you can see that it is filled. I didn't actually quite get it up to the 1 inch. It doesn't need to be perfect. The reason why you need to leave about 1 inch of space is so that when you water your plant, the water actually stays here and soaks into the soil. If you filled your pot up with soil up to here, the water in the soil would just run right off and it wouldn't get a chance to soak in. So now we're going to take our lovely tomato cage. I just get mine at Home Depot. You do need them to support the tomato, just to help keep it from falling over, especially if you're in an area like the part of Ottawa I'm in. I'm right near the Ottawa River, so we're prone to get some pretty gusty thunderstorms here, and you don't want your plant to blow over and get damaged. So you just take the spiky end in and just very carefully sort of, you don't want to hurt any branches, just get it like that and push it right down into the soil, pretty much as far as it'll go. And then you just sort of, you know, any branches that can go above, you put them above, and then this will keep it safe while it's growing. And then the last thing we're going to cover is fertilizer. So this is the fertilizer that I have. I don't necessarily endorse this brand over any other particular brand. I just bought this because it is water soluble, and that's especially important for the tomato plants. If you look here, there's 3 numbers, and that's basically N, P, and K. So nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. And those are the basic nutrients that every plant needs. Nitrogen is for green growth. The potassium helps, think of it as like helping your plant have a good immune system. So it'll help it fight off disease. And if I remember correctly, the phosphorus is good for like vegetables and flowers, colorful things. Now, the reason why I said water soluble is important for, oh, I got a dirt streak on my face. Sorry, back to the topic. Why water soluble is important to tomato plants. If a plant is deficient in phosphorus, the symptom for it is really, really obvious. Basically, these lovely little green leaves will turn purple. And I'm not talking like just a tint of purple, I'm like really purple. Like your leaf will be green one day and the next day you'll come out and you will have purple leaves. And the reason why phosphorus needs to be water soluble is because, or not phosphorus being water soluble, why your fertilizer needs to be water soluble is because phosphorus doesn't move very well in the soil. So if you were to just put some fertilizer on the top of this soil, almost none of the phosphorus would sink in and go down into where the roots were. It would all pretty much just sit on the surface of this plant. So that's why with tomatoes being a phosphorus loving plant, it's really important to get a water soluble fertilizer so that the fertilizer will dissolve into the water, and then it will go down and saturate the whole, all get down to where all the roots are. And the one last final step of potting a plant, it doesn't matter what plant you pot, is you always have to water it in. And basically that you do that to make sure there's no air pockets around the roots. You want to make sure that the roots have good contact with the soil. And normally if a plant had just been watered, I would say to not water it again right away unless it's dried out. Like this soil is pretty moist. Under normal circumstances I would not water this plant because of it being moist, but because it was just potted, I still need to water it in to get rid of those air pockets and make sure there's good contact. When it's really hot out, like it is today, it's about 36, the water in your hose can actually get really hot, and if you were to spray that on your plant, it would probably cook the roots. So always spray it out, stick your hand in the stream until it cools off, so that way you don't damage your plant. And there we go. We have successfully potted a plant. Before I go, I said I'd talk a little bit about potting other things. From my personal experience, if you want to grow, I tend to go off on a bit of a tangent. The reason why I grow only cherry tomatoes in pots is because last year I did try growing larger varieties of tomatoes in pots, and it was not successful. Tomatoes are very prone to a disease called blossom end rot, and basically what that is if they don't get watered consistently enough, the tomatoes will start to rot on the end. You'll know because it will have a black spot that will grow on the bottom of the tomato. Basically, I planted 4 different varieties of large tomatoes last year, and out of the 4 varieties, I think I got 2 itty bitty teeny weeny tomatoes that didn't get the blossom end rot on them. So in my experience growing tomatoes in pots, any small variety, so like any kind of cherry tomato, and there's tons of kinds of cherry tomatoes out there, grape tomatoes, those sorts will do well in pots, whereas the bigger ones, they're a lot harder. You can do it, but they're a lot harder to manage. So if you're just starting out, I would definitely recommend that you start with the cherry or the grape tomato varieties. Now things like you can do peppers. I have done peppers. The only thing I found with the peppers that the peppers that it produced wasn't as big as if it had grown in the ground. Otherwise it was still fine. It was just the size was restricted a little bit. I also have, this year, I'm going to do lettuce. I did spinach last year because I was doing a lot of shakes, and I liked smoothies, and I liked spinach in my smoothies, but this year I want to try the lettuce, and I mean things like lettuce and kale and spinach will do just fine in pots. The only thing is that they have a tendency when it gets really hot out, like if we get a heat wave, they'll bolt, which means they grow really fast and they'll start to flower. And once they start to flower, they're inedible. If you try and eat them, they're super bitter and gross. So if you see your plant bolt, then you know, just prune it back, and maybe if you're lucky in the fall, it might grow back again. You might get a second growth when the weather cools off again, but it's not guaranteed. The other thing about plants is sorry, I almost dropped you guys. You might notice I got some dry, crispy, white leaves on there. And what happened with that was, almost dropped you again. Is that, so when plants grow in a greenhouse or in a greenhouse or a garden center, sometimes they're covered. They have like awnings, or they're in the shade, or if they're in a greenhouse, even if it's a glass greenhouse, it filters out some of the UVs. So the plants are, even if it's full sun, are never actually getting full sun. And if you bring them out and put them straight into full sun, that's what's going to happen. They're going to bleach and they're going to get crispy and dry, and I know that. And I made the mistake, I forgot with my lettuce, and just put it straight out into the full sun, and that's what happened. So basically you just put it outside in a shady or a part sun area for about a week before you move it into the full sun. You know, I accidentally put my tomatoes into the full sun. They were fine. To them it was like nothing, but there are some plants that are sensitive to it, so it's always a good idea to get them used to the full sun slowly. I just want to say thank you to you guys for coming and watching my videos. I hope you enjoy. If you have any questions, as always, my social media links will be in the comment section below. And I just want to say bye, have a good week. I'm not sure what next week's topic is going to be yet, but as soon as I know, I'll let you guys know. I hope to see you all later. Bye.